Hello everybody, this is Matthew Kenslow, and you're probably wondering why I'm juggling. Well, let me tell you, 10 years ago today, on Tuesday, June 7th, 2011, something very incredible happened. It was one of the best days of my life, but let me tell you a little backstory. On Wednesday, May 25th, 2011, I was juggling for the Special Education T for NMUSD for the second year in a row, and I ran into my former principal from Newport Heights Elementary School, and he asked me to come in. Maybe we could set something up so that I could juggle in an assembly, or, well, a small assembly. So I'm like, sure. So I went in and we scheduled June 7th, 2011, and it was for the second graders. And so on this day we went over there. He called the second graders to come to the NPR, or Finley Hall at Newport Heights Elementary, and we went over there and waited for them to come. I saw the piano there, and I asked if I could play the piano, and he said, oh sure. So I played Linus and Lucy on the piano, well, what I knew of it, and then he introduced me, and I got to juggle. I told my story of juggling. I believe I used my testimony of perseverance to encourage the kids, the students, and then I publicly commended the principal. So my battery ran out of the camera momentarily, but then I also juggled clubs as well. I commended the principal because when I was in grade 6 at that school, I was trying out for the talent show that took place in February 2007. And I told the principal that I was considering juggling 4, but I wasn't so good at it yet. But the principal said, you should juggle 4, and I never forgot it, and I went and juggled 4. It wasn't as impeccable as I like it to be, but through perseverance I was better in my 8th grade talent show, May 22nd, 2009. And as you just saw right there in the home video from 2007, that's the same NPR, the same stage that I was at when I juggled for the second graders in 2011, 4 years later. And so after I juggled, all those second graders just surrounded me and wanted to ask questions and wanted to try out juggling for themselves. So I let them go ahead and I gave them a few pointers, and it was just wonderful. The other teachers were there, including my former 3rd grade teacher who at the time taught 2nd grade, and one of the teachers who taught grade 6 when I was there. I didn't have him as my main teacher just for the science rotation, but he was teaching 2nd grade at the time, and he lived down the street from where I used to live, and I believe he retired that year too. Well, anyway, it was just wonderful. It wasn't the first time I went back to juggle, because that aforementioned 3rd grade teacher who taught 2nd grade at the time invited me to come and juggle anytime, and that's what happened on October 22nd, 2010. And I plead with you, please watch that video if you want to. It's only 20 minutes, and I explain how I got started to juggle to schools in the first place, and I read from chapter 14 when I talk about it in this book. I also mentioned the special education T in here, and so I made a reflection / appreciation for NMUSD video on that 10-year anniversary, October 22nd. And then it happened. And while we were having a great time talking with one another and the students practicing to juggle, the principal came up to me and said, the 6th graders are having a party at the back of the school. Do you want to juggle for them? And I'm like, absolutely yes. And so we walk all the way to the back of the school, and all the students were sitting on the grass, and the teachers stood around, and the principal introduced me, and I got to juggle for the entire grade 6 students. Present there was my teacher when I was that age, and a couple of other teachers that I knew from when I was there. It was sentimental because my teacher, when I was in grade 6, that was her last year because she was getting married and moving up to Oregon. And so I started to juggle, and it was just a wonderful time. The students enjoyed it. At one point I called a student up, and he picked a number between 1 and 44, and I gave a biography of the president pertaining to the number that he chose. Nowadays I add like the birth date, the death date, and I rattle all that, as well as math shortcuts and such, like 102 times 105, or what's 5,052 squared and such. And what I also like is teaching how I do those math shortcuts to the students as well, provided that they're at that math level. And that was my day, June 7th, 2011. I remember getting ready for it for days, practicing, and also practicing with and rehearsing what I was going to say. And I remember that day being at Newport Harbor High School and such. It was a B-day, and then finally arriving there. And then here's something that I must have forgot was the same day. That evening was the freshman movie that I was a cameo in, and I helped film. I believe I helped film that year. And they played it at the Lido Theater, and I was in it when I was a freshman, but for the next 2 years thereafter I helped out and was a cameo, so that was that night. But back to Newport Heights Elementary, afterward the principal asked me if I would like to come in the next academic year in September and plan an all-school assembly where I could come and juggle. And I'm like, absolutely. So I would have been a junior in high school at the time. I mean, this is just wonderful. I mean, very great. So I was so excited, and I went in September 2011, and of all years that teacher got promoted, and which is very good for him. But I got to meet the new principal, and she never ever asked me. She was very nice, but she never asked me to come and juggle for everybody. In the interim, I have juggled for my former 3rd grade teacher, 2nd grade class, for a couple of years until 2017, in early 2017 when he started 1st grade, and I've been juggling for 1st grade ever since, sometimes multiple 1st grade classes at the same time. And in 2017 to 2019, for a couple of times a year, I would juggle at Ray Elementary School, and I was even invited to their spring festival where I juggled at. That's on YouTube if you're interested, April 26, 2019. And here's where it all happened 10 years ago. Well, half of it was right over here in this field over there. And that room at the end was my room when I was in grade 6. So it's very sentimental to be back. I was here a couple of weeks thereafter because my 3rd grade teacher who taught 2nd grade at the time invited me back to juggle for the last day party, and I was there for maybe an hour or two, and I was actually one of the questions in their Jeopardy talking about the juggler, like who is Matthew Kenslow. I remember I came in my vest and tie again, and it was like the graduation rehearsals, and so afterward I went around to give something to my former grade 6 teacher because she was again moving, and I gave her a card and everything. And as I was going around, before I even got there, a lot of people recognized me from juggling a few weeks prior, and they asked me to sign their yearbook. So I felt very special about that. And it was independent, like one person asked, and then another person asked, and another person asked. I believe some of the 2nd graders asked me to sign their yearbook. And so again, I felt very special. And over there behind me, behind that walkway, is the Finley Hall or the multi-purpose room where I juggled at. Now let me tell you one story that I really want to get out because I'm still kicking myself over it. When I was along the side of the classroom where those 6th graders were having their party, before I even got there and people started to ask for me to sign their yearbook, one of those who came up to me to ask, I asked him what his name was so that I could write it in Gothic calligraphy, which is what I do. And I'm like, that's not really a unique name, but I hardly hear anyone with that same name. And when I was in 5th grade here, I was in an after-school program, and I had a project with a person with that same name, and I'd done the math, and the distance of time between us, like between 1st grade and 5th grade and between grade 6 and grade 10, were like the same. So it was probably the same person. Not only that, I remembered the last name. I'm still kicking myself for not confirming the last name because I believe I remember him like 4 years prior. Another amazing thing that happened about 4 years after this, in like circa 2015, I was visiting my RSP teacher, and while I was in there, a boy actually asked me if I was the juggler here in 2011, and I said yes, and he complimented me, like saying that a lot of us really thought that was very neat. In fact, on Facebook, I believe it was the sister of one of my friends that I made when I was a student here, commented on a public post. It was me and my grade 6 teacher, and she was like, I was there in the comments. So again, I tell of how I got started in juggling for schools here in my book in chapter 14, and again in my October 22nd video, which I referred you to. And speaking about the book, this school is mentioned approximately 18 times in here, and the library has an autographed copy. So going forward in the future, I'm very excited to be returning back and all the other schools in NMUSD to juggle and speak and make my unique, one-of-a-kind encouragement and motivation to the students that they have a purpose and a calling. I have a juggling analogy about not giving up. I have a science demo analogy about not holding things in. I forwarded my October 22nd video to the head of the special education department, and she actually knows me from the special education team. And she said, thanks Matthew for making my day, and believe me, when the schools open up, we'll get you in the schools so that you could juggle for them and encourage them. And that's all I ever want, is to be an encouragement. Also the Capistrano Unified knows about me, and I anticipate Santa Ana, Tustin, Irvine Unified, LA, and such. So I'm very excited about that because the world needs encouragement, especially in a world where there's a lot more disabled people. You have a purpose and don't give up, so I'm excited for that. And wherever you're at, have a great day.